I'm Phil Graves with Daltile's Exteriors program for outdoor living products. I'm here today with Tom Kirk, Chief Technical Officer and co-founder of ROMEX, who makes installation and jointing systems for segmental paving, including porcelain pavers. We are here in Dallas, Texas, at the operating yard of the largest commercial paving installer in the state of Texas, PavePro. And 6 months ago, we decided to install this test pad of Daltile's made in the USA 2cm porcelain pavers. In this case, it's the nominee series concrete visual, and we installed it on the ROMEX installation system, which is really made up of 3 primary parts. And Tom, why don't you tell us what those 3 parts are?
So over the open graded prepared base material, we have first of all the truss bed. So we have 3 inches of our truss bedding. So that's a porous concrete essentially, polymer modified, and provides the support system and setting system for the paving material. Then we have the adhesion elutriant. That is essentially a thin set. Behaves, acts, installs just like any thin set. It's just our product name for it. And that is what is bonding the tile to the bedding system and making it essentially one system and one monolith. And then finally, we finish that out with our EcoFine joint material. So that's a pre-packaged bucket, super simple to install, no mixing. You just open the bucket, wet the surface, squeegee it in, and sweep it off. So you don't have any sort of cleaning and acid washing and things after the fact.
Now, I heard all this back in Hardscape North America in October, and it sounded wonderful to me, right? It sounds like, well, we've got the solution now. However, you're talking about 3 inches, right? 3 inches of the truss bedding. For me, seeing is believing, and so we had to see it. So we decided to come down here. PavePro was gracious enough to let us use their yard. We installed this the first week of December. And even though we're in Texas and Dallas, it's North Texas, we don't get a lot of winter, but we got a couple of hard freezes after this went in. And then because it's Dallas, we have a lot of thunderstorm activity, and we've had a ton this spring. But more importantly, if you look over here to our right, your left, you can see the bulk aggregate bins. So on a daily basis, we've got fully loaded dump trucks coming through this parking lot, literally turning their tires on the top of this pavement test pad, and then either dumping or picking up and coming back over it again, really on a daily basis. And then behind us, Tom, you can see this is their storage yard for other pavers, retaining wall blocks, natural stone, etc. More and more porcelain as time goes on. But that has flatbeds and 18-wheeler truck traffic driving straight out here, right across this test pad, and out to get to the job sites on a daily basis. So that's 6 months ago. We've talked about it here and there on different social media outlets, but nobody's ever seen the actual traffic. So that's what we're gonna do. We're gonna give people an eyeful of the type of traffic that this has been handling on a daily basis for 6 months and a week, and holding up absolutely beautifully, and no bond broken whatsoever. Tom, before we start putting traffic on this, I had an idea. We want to talk about the joint material. I know that your joint material is permeable for water flow, as is the truss bedding system.
Correct.
And if you put it over a clean aggregate base, it's a permeable system. However, most people, especially in the hardscape industry, contractors, they start thinking about what a permeable pavement looks like. They're picturing concrete pavers with large lugs on them touching each other, and then like a number 8 or number 9 chip stone as your joint infill.
Yeah.
Now, if that gets clogged up, as the system will do over time, you take the vacuum equipment and you suck all the stone out of the joints, and you replace it with clean aggregate. With this material, your particles are really quite small. Mm-hmm. So if you look at the environment around us right now, it's all dense graded aggregate, and at this point kind of a lot of mud too. I've been checking on this pad for the last 6 months, and every time I come out, it's all covered up with dirt and sometimes mud, and it's just kind of a mess in general. So I have to believe that is clogging up the joints like crazy, which we've checked it out already, and yeah, the joints were clogged, right? You couldn't get anything in. So how do you retain, or in this case, restore permeability of the system when you've got a bounded, tiny particle joint material?
Yeah, so that's a great question, Phil. It's actually one of our most frequently asked by everybody, really, contractors, landscape architects. Simply, our recommendation is once or twice a year, or as required, is just to simply power wash the joint material. Essentially, what you have with the joint material is a whole bunch of aggregate that's held together like this. So each of these aggregates represents a piece of sand on a microscopic level. So these are covered in the resin, and at the contact points, they bond together using the strength of the resins that we have to make a solid matter. However, you can see holes and pores in that. So that is what is allowing the water to flow through our joint sand and subsequently into the bedding and the ground below. Now, with this kind of a particular abuse and other things in life in general, leaves falling off trees, silts in the air, pollen, sediment and debris can collect and does collect on the paver surface and clogs those joints, as you correctly point out. Our only recommended maintenance for this type of system is to power wash.
Now, can I stop you for a second there? Because I think I'm going to get hives thinking about power washing the joint material. Most likely going to blow the joint material right out.
That is correct. And that's exactly the advantage that the ROMEX joint materials provide, is that you can power wash your driveway actually as many times as you want in a year, or your patio. I would say yes, it's going to happen. You're going to get dirt, your dog and kids will do things, you might spill barbecue sauce on it, anything like that can happen, and you want to be able to clean it. If you have to clean it, and then you subsequently lose your joint material, that is going to give you not only a bit of a pain, but an added cost. You may have to call a contractor or go and purchase more joint material. With this stuff, because you can power wash it for year after year after year, you're never going to have to replace that joint material.
So you've got permeability and power washer safe, and as we can see on video, now that we've power washed the joints out and we introduce a little bit of water out of the water bottle, just give it a second, there it goes. It's going right down into the joint. Permeability restored.
Exactly, and that's because the matrix of the sand is small enough that sediment is only collecting on the very top of the surface. So the power washer can come in, blows it out, and the permeability is restored. And that's exactly what we demonstrate here today.
Which makes perfect sense, because if you've got chip stone in a concrete paver permeable application, the voids are much bigger, so a lot more detritus and other pollutants can get down into the joint and clog it up at a deeper level, which is why you have to remove it and replace with clean.
And the official recommendation, I believe, is to remove 1.5 inches of that joint material on a 1 to 3 year basis. I've lived in certain situations in a condominium where that was there. It actually didn't happen for various reasons, and when it finally did, which was longer than that, the system had already become clogged up and impermeable. And when it was replaced, we then had loose grit through the condo building, in the elevator, and all over the place. And I'd say one of the biggest requests and complaints that we get at ROMEX would be that, basically loose grit, people looking for an opportunity not to have to do that replacement. How about if you can just do it once and annually or biannually power wash your patio infinitely without having to every 1 to 3 years replace all the joint material and redo it, and maintain that permeability, or at least an extremely high percentage of that permeability. I think that's a huge advantage.
I think it's a huge advantage too, Tom. The permeability is one thing. The ability to restore permeability is another thing. But really, for me as the manufacturer of the porcelain pavers, I want to sell porcelain pavers, and we've been selling it over unbound aggregate, whether it's a sand setting bed over dense graded aggregate or a chip stone setting bed over like a number 57 stone clean open graded aggregate. The issue has always been, what about the joints? And the joints have always been a maintenance issue. So if you're unbound, you have to have your edge restraints for perimeter containment. Right. So you don't get them creeping apart from each other. You have to have permanent spacers underneath the tiles so that they have a positive mechanical connection from one paving unit to its neighbor via the transfer between that spacer bar. And because you have to have the spacers, if you don't, the tiles move together and they start to chip each other. Right. So even if you've got that perfect perimeter containment, perfect bottom spacer, there's still some movement in the system, and because the tile is so dense, polymeric sands don't really stick to the side of it, so the moment you get movement, the sand starts to come loose, and despite the fact that there's no harm done to the pavers whatsoever, and they will basically not age for decades, unlike some of the other common decorative paving materials, people expect it to be perfect. The joints are far from perfect. there's too much maintenance for a lot of people for them to want to monkey with it.
Exactly.
And the contractors don't like getting the callback on that. So they start steering people in a different direction, something that they know is a little bit more reliable. So for me, all three of those benefits, this is a bonded system, no edge restraint, no permanent spacers, just use tile spacers and pull them. And you've got sand that is permeable, or joint material, I'm sorry, that's permeable, that you can restore permeability because the holes are so small that the pollutants don't get in and clog it any more than surface level. And most importantly, because it's a bonded system, the joint material just doesn't come out. It doesn't need maintenance. I mean, 6 months after heavy vehicle truck traffic, there's not one bit of joint material coming out of this. It looks perfect, and we restored permeability. Tom, there's a missing piece here, and I imagine, yeah, a lot of people have probably been seeing this in the background going, I bet they're not going to talk about it, right? It probably broke and nobody wants to see it. But actually, why is the piece missing right here?
Piece is missing because we like to thoroughly test all our stuff. And sometimes that involves taking it apart, breaking it, and trying to do some of the destructive testing that we're actually doing as part of this process. So we're looking at how the bond went, how the bedding actually set up underneath, make sure it's completely intact, as well as going to get a nice side profile picture so that we can show you guys exactly how the buildup looks in real life, not just from a drawing.
All right, everybody, as you can see, there was no concrete slab underneath this test pad of 2 cm porcelain pavers, but you can clearly see this is the trash bedding. Tom, why don't you talk to us a little bit about that trash bedding? And we did put a tape on it. It was right at 3 inches and actually maybe a little bit less.
Exactly. One of the things that I would talk about is one of the ways that we help to keep the product cost effective and save on trucking and things like that is to actually source the aggregate locally. So what we do is we actually mix the trash compound powder with 4 parts aggregate. So it's basically 4 5-gallon buckets of chipstone with 1 bag of our powder. So what that means is, in all different parts of the country, there are different terminologies, types, kinds, qualities of aggregates. What the trash bed essentially calls for, in American money, would be something from about 3/16 to 3/8 in size, ideally around the 1/4 inch mark, plus or minus. For our friends north of the border, that's going to be about 3 or 4 millimeters up to 9 or 10 millimeter chipstone. The stone needs to be clear and free from fines, sediment, contaminants, things like that. The more that we do that, the stronger the compressive strength and the bond is going to be.
And angular, right? Angular on the stone as well?
Angular, some rounded is okay, but actually for structure, a little mishmash of sizes. If you think about little angular particles and round stuff getting all nice and mashed together, just kind of like what we're seeing here, versus like a bunch of marbles that were just like round in lines, you can imagine that the structure and strength is going to be better that way because these particles can interlock. Rather than just being in rows or lines.
And also not flat, because they'll break down over time.
That's correct. So
okay,
here's
good.
An example from our digging and breaking out exercise. You can see the range of aggregate sizings in here. Creates the structure.
Yet permeable.
Correct.
Well, I think it's finally time to drive some trucks.
Okay.
Right on, let's do it.
Let's do it.
Well, that was a heck of a deal, Tom.
That was unbelievable.
We saw some very heavy loads driving over just 2 cm porcelain pavers on
3 inches of our truss bed, D1 jointing in between.
That's it. No reinforcement in there, no concrete slab underneath.
Nope,
that's
just
it.
an open graded base.
You know, I can't help but think, since we're driving things over it though, you know, bring out the 14-year-old boy in me. I wish we would have had a tank.
Oh yeah? Funny you mentioned that, Phil, because take a look behind you.
There's one right behind us, isn't there?
Yes, sir. What do you think? Shall we do it?
I think we better run it over with a tank.
All right, man.
What do you say?
Let's do it.
All right, brother, let's do it.